Okay, false color sketches in Clip Studio Paint. This was a morning coffee session. I have moved on from coffee to my tea. Still need caffeine, but slightly less caffeine. All right, let's talk setup. So first off, for the references, which you can see in the top left, I'm using the Proco Timer, which is a relatively new tool over at the Proco site. I will put a link to it in the description if you want to try it. But basically over on Proco, you can use this timer to load up all the photos from any packs that you have bought on Proco. And then you can set how long you want to draw them for and how many you want to do, and it will cycle through them. If you don't have packs on Proco, there's plenty of other apps that do this. I forget the names of ones I've used in the past before, but I think there's one that's just called Figure Drawing. The app is just called Figure Drawing, and you indicate folders on your computer where you have photo packs, and it will go through them in random order or in sequence. So the nice thing about the Proco one is that you don't have to have these huge folders that are multiple gigabytes on it. Now, as to what I'm doing here I'm using Clip Studio Paint. This is version 3.0. This is the Pro version, not EX. I only know that because I only just bought a Perceptual license. It's only because I just did the research that I can remember, which is Pro and which is EX. But yeah, I got the 3.0 Perceptual license, which currently is on a sale where you can, when 4.0 comes out, you can upgrade it for free. And the main difference between Pro and X is that X has a bunch of multi-page document tools, which maybe I will need in the future, but I'm not 100% sure. So there's a huge price difference between the two. So I went with the cheaper one because I'm not 100% sure I would need those tools yet. And I'm using, you can see it right under the references, I'm using one of the standard Clip Studio brushes. It's the, I think it's called the hard mixer brush or the medium hardness mixer brush, something like that. And I have just squished it. Actually here, I think I'm just using it full round, like the hard round brush. And later in the session, I do squish it so that it's a little slanted. And the only special thing that I did is that I turned on perceptual color mixing instead of standard color mixing. If you want to know how to do that, just Google how to turn on perceptual color mixing on a brush in Clip Studio Paint. You have to go into a couple menus. I did add them to my brush hotbar over there on the left so that I could easily turn it on and off. So let me explain what that is. This brush is already a mixer brush, which means that as you paint, it is putting down the color that you have chosen, but it is also mixing with the colors that are underneath it already on that layer. So it's sort of always blurring into them. It's always sort of mixing the colors. That's not for everybody. I am okay with that because this is actually the same behavior that one of my favorite brushes in Procreate used to do. And so I'm used to it, and I like it, and I like the chaos that it gives. Now, normally, this is set to mix colors in the standard mode. That is to say, the same way that something like Photoshop would mix colors. That is to say, in a way that is completely unnatural when compared to how paint actually, physical paint, mixes on a palette. So if you're in Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint normally, if you mix yellow and blue, you are going to get a weird neutral gray, ugly digital blend between yellow and blue. It's not going to give you what we learned in grade school, which is green. It's not going to mix to create green. That's because the digital environment is totally different from the traditional environment. And indeed, it's kind of its own thing. It's not even mimicking the truth of the digital environment that you are operating in, because the RGB pixels on your monitor behave in a totally different way. You would get totally different results. Like if you mixed blue and yellow in the RGB space, the way your monitor does, you would actually get white because that would complete the full color spectrum, because red and green in RGB make yellow. You throw in blue, that completes all three RGB, which produces white spectrum light. So that's a divergence for nerds, but it's a totally fake system. The colors that you get when you mix things generally in something like Photoshop, when you switch it to perceptual mode, which you can't do in Photoshop, but you can do in Clip Studio, it will try to, not perfectly, it doesn't do it perfectly, but it does try to mimic basic mixtures. So if you try to mix blue and yellow, it will give you some approximation of a green. And you know, a lot of people go to digital for its intense level of control, but for certain tastes, you know, for just moods that you're in, especially when you're just freely sketching, I really like the chaos that a mode like this brings. It also kind of unifies the digital practice and the traditional practice a little bit. You know, it starts activating the color mixing part of your brain, even in the digital environment. So if you do have a mixed practice, like I do both traditional and digital, then it kind of unifies it a bit and lets you practice both types of thinking. But the main reason that I'm doing it here is for the chaos, of it, getting a lot of little variations and unexpected changes and color variety to sort of avoid that perfect digital flatness, which makes working very boring and makes it difficult to want to keep going. Okay, so that's the program, that's the references. What is false color? What do I mean by false color? Well, you saw it on that first demo that just flashed by. It just means that I am working in color from colored references, but I am not trying to use the colors that are in the references. It is, of course, okay to use colors that are in the references, like here on this cloaked female, I'm using green for the cloak, just like her cloak is in the reference. But, you know, certainly on that figure, the first one that I did, you know, the bluish purple skin is quite different from his actual skin tone. There's a lot of colors being introduced that are just not in the reference. So that's what I mean by false color. But rest assured, there's no such thing as an actual false color. There's just color, right? Like you're under no obligation ever to replicate the colors that are in a reference. Color is just like the rest of art, structureless space, and you can do whatever you want with it. But that's the idea of that terminology there, just that you're using colors that are not directly in the reference. And why? Why? You know, it's not for its own sake. This is actually a technique that I have been using for a long time and started developing at actual in-person figure drawing classes many, many years ago. We're talking, I guess it's been almost a decade now since the particular figure drawing classes that I'm thinking of here. That's crazy. So these were figure drawing classes that I used to do every week after work at the studio that I used to work at. So the studio would hire a model to come into one of the bigger meeting rooms, and we would do life drawing in there. And mostly the artists on the art team, but also other people at the studio, people who were not on the art teams, would come and do figure drawing. And I did all sorts of work in those figure drawing sessions, and I did try to go every single week. But one of the methods that I wound up bumping into, and that I am sort of replicating here, is that I would use these water-based, very bright fluorescent markers. They were Tombow markers. And I would do this sort of false color approach live from the model. So I was choosing sort of these pastel-y, almost 80s neon colors, but really I think that was mostly because that was sort of the color range selection available in this brand of markers. Maybe if they had a broader range of neutrals, I would have wound up using those just because my taste is naturally more towards the neutral. But these markers, at least at the time, just happened to come in mostly these pastel fluorescent colors. So before figure drawing, I would basically, You know, I had a whole lot of them, and I would just basically grab a random selection because I didn't know who the model was going to be, if they were going to be in costume for this session, if they weren't in costume, if they were going to be mostly nude. I didn't know what their skin tone was going to be. I had no way to predict before I went to class. So I would basically just grab a random handful of these markers, rubber band them together, and if I got a blue, a red, a yellow, and a black, and a gray, that was all I had for the session. And I would work with that. So I would, in the demo that's running right now, it happened a bit ago, but if you were to rewind, you would see that I started the sketch by sketching with yellow. And why would I use yellow? Because it's very light, you know, even though it's color, it sort of approximates the value range of a very light pencil undersketch, right? Because yellow is just a brighter value when it's near its chroma point, which it is there. And it is coming out of a yellow marker. So that was something that I would do in the sessions as well. I would use a yellow marker often or a very pale magenta to do the undersketch, just because it was lower contrast against the white paper that I would use. And then I would slowly build up to darker and darker tones. And I would overlay the markers a lot. So I would maybe do a full pass of yellow over the entire silhouette of the figure, and then I would cut into that with cyan. And I would get these really fun effects where if I did it fast enough, the cyan going over the yellow would mix to green a little bit. If I wasn't fast enough and the yellow dried significantly, the cyan wouldn't become as much of a green and it would hold its identity as cyan a little bit more over the yellow. And that was a lot of fun, and it was fun sort of managing in my head as I worked, like, okay, if I go really fast, it's gonna turn green. If I go a little slower here, it's gonna stay cyan. And I did that for a really, really long time. Maybe I'll do another video sometime where I still have some of those markers. Maybe I'll do a video where I show the traditional version of this technique. But here I am basically doing it again, digital. And I did specifically want to do this session to test what it would be like to sort of return to that old method that I haven't done in a while in the digital space, since I had perceptual color mixing available to me in Clip Studio Paint. And it was a lot of fun. So that's the technique. Why you would want to do it? I think there's a very good reason to do this technique, and that is that it frees you immediately while you work. If you are committed early on to not using the colors that are actually in the reference, it sort of gives you some breathing room around what you're doing, and you stop obsessing over matching the reference, because right from the beginning, you see that it doesn't look like the reference, right? You know, the reference has brown skin and my picture is blue, right? So that inherently shifts your intuitions about what you're trying to do with the picture, and I find that very freeing. Now, if you're the kind of artist who your goal is basically to work from reference all the time, you know, you want to be a portrait artist or something like that, maybe this is going to be less useful for you in the long run. But for someone like me, where my goals are very clear to me, right? Or not my goals, but just what I'm interested in doing with my art. You know, I have a very strong opinion about what I'm into, what I'm not into, what I want to be able to do, what is less important to me, what belongs in my pictures, things like that. Because I have a very strong opinion about that, I know that my main focus is working from imagination. As much as I love working from reference and doing something like life drawing, either in person or working from photos like this, I know in my guts that it's never the end goal. You know, this is not where I'm going with my voice, with my final artistic input. The things that really interest me most are things that I do out of my head. So because I'm very confident in that, I'm free to just not worry about a lot of the classic strictures of working from reference. You'll notice when I sketch that I sketch pretty crazily. You know, I really distort things, bend things. I'm really not concerned with matching the proportions or the likeness of the references at all. And I let myself do that because, well, I said let myself do that. This isn't really about permission. It's like, if I'm really going to be someone who's going to spend most of their time working out of their head, there's not going to be proportions to reference, likenesses to reference. So it actually doesn't make sense for me to waste time worrying about that. So I don't. Instead of getting caught up thinking that I have to be every kind of artist all the time, I just do the things that are actually relevant to me. So I look at the forms, I analyze the forms, I push the colors in the way that I'm trying to experiment with, and most importantly, I just let myself have fun. I don't let any worries about if I'm matching the reference or something like that get in the way of fun. So I think that's the main reason to do this sort of false color method, if you're interested in something like this, is just to immediately unhook the mind from stressing about matching the reference and just inviting the mind to play more and to transform more and to invent more. It's still pretty close to the references. I could have gone much wilder, but I didn't in this particular session. I was mostly going wild with just the colors, but I could have changed proportions and poses in much more significant ways. And if anything, I think that the differences in the overall color handling would have only invited that, would have made it easier to lean into that. So that's why I think it's a good idea to every now and then try something like this. And of course, by that, I mean, you have to do what I do. You better not be out there doing your own thing. Your own thing, you haven't thought about it enough. You gotta copy me. Trust me, I've thought about this a lot. I'm a great artist, and you need to copy me. If I say do this because it's a good idea, you better do it, and you better do it for a year, even though I've done this literally once for an hour and a half one morning, and will probably not do it again for another 5 years or something like that. All right, that brings me to the actual next point that I want to talk about, which is what is the point of an exercise like this in the larger context of the practice, this whole morning coffee thing, as I like to call it. Some people would traditionally call what I'm doing here a warm-up. And certainly I will use that phrase too, usually when I'm just trying to communicate to someone that I'm not working on a serious finished picture, right? If my wife, well, my wife gets all of this, but let's say she didn't. If my wife came up to me at my desk while I was working on this, and she was like, "Oh, what are you working on?" I might be inclined to just say, "Oh, I'm warming up," just because everybody kind of knows what that means, that it's no big deal, that it's light, that you're just trying to get things under you. But I want to level with you that for me, I don't actually feel that's what I'm doing. I don't really believe in quote unquote warming up. I mean, there's certainly yes, there's a little, getting into the groove with your hand, and maybe that takes a few minutes, but I really don't think it takes more than a few minutes. I'm sure halfway or a quarter way through the first sketch that I did, I was sort of quote unquote warmed up. But even if warming up really is a thing, right? Let me grant that you just get linearly better throughout a drawing session. That's not why I'm doing something like this, and that's not why I do my morning coffee sessions. This is Sandbox time. It's pure playtime, and it is not about warming up to some other end. That would sort of instrumentalize it in a way that I don't personally like and doesn't resonate with my practice. If I'm drawing, I'm just drawing. And all drawings are sort of the same to me. They all have the same value. A quick little sketch can have as much value to me as a big finished drawing, because each drawing is an opportunity to express your entire voice, your entire practice, and your internalized goals. So I don't want to instrumentalize these kinds of sketches as sort of preparing me for quote unquote serious work later in the day or after this or anything like that. If you like something like that, That's great. You do you, baby. But for me, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't work. So what is it for me? So this is Sandbox time. It is meant to be for pure play, and I try to avoid instrumentalizing my morning coffee as much as possible. When I sit down with my big cup of caffeine, often first thing in the day, this session was, quite early in the day and well before breakfast. I was really earning my breakfast out here. No, see, there it is again. I'm instrumentalizing it, right? It's a way to earn my breakfast. No. It is just done utterly for its own sake. And that may sound easy, but in this era, it turns out it's actually quite difficult to do something entirely for its own sake. It does get easier as you sort of get better at managing your internality, but the way that our culture is these days, it's very easy to get caught in loops where every little thing you do is just explicitly for a reason, some end goal, something that you're trying to get to, that makes it always so that it's not quite good enough, that things need to change, that it's working towards something else, all these things. And our culture is constantly pushing you on that, is inclining you to think that way. You will find, at least early on, that if you try to do something for entirely its own sake, because such a thing is not really culturally conditioned strongly, reinforced strongly, intrusive thoughts come barging in very, very quickly. And you start asking yourself, needlessly, are you wasting time? Is there something better you could be doing with your time? Is it time to do a drawing that's really going to get you some respect and clout and people are going to like seeing it, and can you sell it and make money and all this? It's, you let me know. You let me know if that has ever happened to you. You're just trying to sit and draw and relax, to sort of take the edge off and keep yourself from having an anxious breakdown, and the intrusive thoughts come. It's very common. And again, I think our culture sort of slides you that way if you're not paying attention. So it's actually quite difficult to sort of manage your internality and knock yourself left and right such that you can genuinely just work for the fun of it and play with things and try new things and things like that. And for me, that's what my morning coffee is. I try to keep it so that I can do anything that I want there. I can, and I really mean, I need it to be anything, right? So it can be without a purpose or with a purpose, right? There's the counterintuitive thing, right? Like I can either make it very guided, I can make it not guided. I can work representationally, I can work abstractly. I can work on one drawing, I can work on hundreds of drawings. I can work fast, I can work slow, I can bop around. My morning coffee time is Sandbox time. It should feel utterly wide open. And I'll even work on drawings that are in development in that time. But when I do that, let's say that I pull into the morning coffee time a drawing that already has like 30 hours in it, I will try to, yes, I'm going to work on that drawing, but I will try to introduce new things into the drawing at that time. I will try to make some unexpected decisions, throw myself a curveball, change something in a significant way in that session, rather than just doing the due diligence of craftsmanship in that time, like flatting value shapes or a background or something like that. I will sort of apply the exploratory sandbox energy to this drawing that is already quite far in development. And that's important to me because I need drawings to always feel like they are alive and open to change, or else I will get bored of doing them and then I will stop drawing. And if I do that, that is an existential disaster. So I have every reason to keep things alive and to not lock up. So that's my morning coffee time, my Sandbox time. It does usually happen in the morning, but it can, of course, happen anytime. And I encourage you to put some time in your schedule to basically just have a private, intimate conversation between you and the art practice that floats above all of the other things you have to do with art that are much more structured, right? If you get caught up for a long time doing only the more structured side of art, these structures that you're projecting onto your art, doing actual finished drawings. If you're a teacher, giving feedback, which usually requires you to be working in a much more structured paradigm. Certainly delivering anything to clients, doing pictures that just have a lot more design criteria on them. Those things are wonderful, of course, but they're wonderful in balance. Once you've actually spent any amount of time doing those things professionally for long periods, or even before you're professional, just if you're trying to spend a long time making art in a very structured way, you will find that it gets very exhausting and can actually start draining your energy if you haven't carved out a part of the practice that is explicitly about the exploratory, free part of art and the things that you are interested in. And inevitably, as you do this, some of the things that you do in your sandbox time, you find that, actually, I really like this technique that I found, and I think I can sort of find a way to fold it into my more professional work, or the voice that I put out there is sort of my finished art, things like that. And that's great, right? Like, that's a wonderful benefit of the sandbox time, but it's not actually necessary. And I don't think that that's the best, like, explicit goal for your sandbox time. Like, I think the best explicit goal for your sandbox time is to just keep you happy, right? The art practice is going to crumble if you're not happy. I personally would keep doing this exploratory sandbox time, even if I knew it was guaranteed that for the rest of my life, it would never produce a technique or an insight that would transfer into the final work. Let's say some magic genie, some evil genie cursed me with that, said, you can still do sandbox time, but it will magically never, ever improve your art. You won't even get better. The sandbox time won't make you a better artist, and it certainly won't ever give you any techniques that will transfer to your finished work that you actually want to sort of be associated with. This is what Stephen makes. I would say, damn you, genie, and I'm gonna keep doing it because it makes me happy, right? And I think that that's the best thing this kind of time could give you. As long as you're joyful and happy, you'll be able to handle everything else. The main thing that makes people's art crumble and makes them quit the practice is just that they're miserable. It's that they're horribly sad. No one ever quits art happily. People quit art depressed. And that being the lowest common denominator in those experiences, I think that says something. So if, on the other hand, the genie said, you can keep doing the morning coffees, and in fact, I will 3x the number of insights that they give to improve your art, but it will make you miserable every time that you do it, I would stop immediately. I would never do it again. I would only do the finished work, and I would accept knowing that the finished work is missing out on insights that I could have pulled from the morning coffee. And I would never doubt that I made the right call, because if I'm miserable, I'll just stop making art. I won't do it. It's like, who cares how good it is if I'm only going to do one and then quit in a depression? You need to be happy while you do this. You can fool yourself into thinking that it's okay to be awfully depressed while you make art, but just look around you. Look at the great artists of the past. Is that really true? Don't worry, I did the thinking for you, and I did the research. I know you're not going to go off and actually do the research, you jerk. Don't worry, I did it for you. No, it isn't. It isn't worth it. It creates bad habit patterns that ultimately hamstring the practice and ruin your life eventually. In the extreme, you will find that you keep yourself depressed and addicted to past sources of negative energy, because sort of your unconscious feels it needs that to make good art, and it values the good art over your own health. It's not a separate thing. It's you, right? You sort of value the art over your own health. And so you keep grinding yourself into dust in the rather abject and disgusting hope that it'll keep good art flowing out of you. And you know, art is actually disassociated from the emotions that you're going through, so you will get good art even though you're depressed, and you'll make a false connection and you'll keep yourself depressed, and eventually you'll just quit because your body can't take it anymore. You know, you will have stressed yourself to death. You know, you won't have any energy left. You'll be a nervous wreck. Another side of the extreme, I've seen this happen to a bunch of people, unfortunately. Well, actually, this is a fortunate thing. If you create that very negative pattern, something very interesting that can happen one day is that you'll get over your depression, right? You'll get over your, not your depression, but like the traumas that are creating a lot of the negative feeling, you'll get over them, you know, for other reasons, right? You'll either have that conversation with that person in your life, or you'll get out of this negative living situation or something like that. Like, people have all sorts of horrible traumas, right? But for reasons other than the art, you will heal your trauma. And then because you have created such a deep link between the trauma and your art, you'll stop making art, you know, because you never built the habit, created the habit energy, created the incentive structure to do art for happiness, to do art for joy. And I have, unfortunately, again, it's only unfortunate from the art side, right? Like, the people that I've seen go through this, it's like, obviously I'm happy for them, right? Like, I would rather they be untraumatized and peaceful and not making art than traumatized and making art. You know, we have to have our priorities straight here, right? So it's not actually a bad thing. It's a good thing that this happened in their life. But I'm saying that from where I'm standing and with the things that I see, it's not actually necessary. You know, if they had been a little bit more thoughtful about nurturing the happy part of the practice, they could have cured their trauma. And then once it was gone, because they had already unshackled the desire to make art from negative emotion, they're just going to keep making art. You know, they already understand that it's a source of joy and it's not associated with suffering. And then things will only get better because now they have less suffering and trauma in their life, which frees up a lot of psychic energy to just focus on the art. So I think that this sandbox time, this totally free time, this no structure time, this no expectation time, is a great practice environment for nurturing that wholesome relationship with art, right? And again, it's like anything can be in here, but I think that you're not getting the most out of it. The most out of it that I'm talking about here is basically saving your life, right? What I just described is a huge existential benefit to your life, right? Like, I'm doing art happily, and creativity doesn't stop when I cure my traumas, right? That sounds pretty goddamn important and significant, and it is. So that, to me, is like the best thing you could get out of sandbox time. And if you instrumentalize this free sandbox exploratory playtime into just, I do this so that I draw better later in the day or later in the session, okay, but that you missed out on something so much grander, I think. You missed out on something that it really is more robust and leads to more important changes throughout the practice, which is this opportunity to nurture your peaceful enjoyment of art. Hold on, I gotta sip some tea. Oh my God, tea is good. Oh. Oh, that's good. Oh, life is such a bounty. Oh, it feels like I can feel it spreading all the way to my fingertips. What a bounty. What a beautiful thing is the world. Okay, what was I saying? Use sandbox time as an opportunity to practice feeling joyful while you work. That is, I want to be very clear, that's a thing you need to practice, right? It can come completely automatically. It inevitably does if you spend enough time drawing, but these things can be nurtured, right? You can make it happen more. You can make it more clear that that's the case. And that is actually a hugely useful skill to have in the art practice. As one more broadside against the idea of warming up, it's like, it only seems to work sometimes, you know? I mean, I've had this experience a lot. I don't know if you have, but I think it's pretty common that, yeah, you sit down to warm up, but it turns out that the very first sketch in the warm-up session, actually that one was the best, you know, with the base energy of like being fresh and coming to the session fresh, and things actually stiffened up as time went on. That does call into question how much control you have over something like warming up. And honestly, how many times have you warmed up and then you have a great 1 hour warm-up session and then you go to draw and you're tired and it sucks? It's because you blew all your energy in the warm-up and you're kind of bored of drawing now. It's like, I just don't think it's actually that robust, consistent, and useful of a paradigm. I mean, these sketches, I did 20 minutes for each, right? Like I didn't start with 15-second gestures, then go up to 1 minute, then 5, and then one final 20 minutes. Like, no, I just want enough time to sink into them and to just enjoy drawing. So I just started right off the bat with 20 minutes. And to wrap up here, let me point out what I'm doing here. I did all the other sketches, and then at the end of the session, I had learned some things about how to use this technique. You know, this is really the first session I ever did with this setup in Clip Studio and with the perceptual mixing, right? So I learned a bunch about how the brush was going to operate throughout doing the other sketches. So at the end of the session here, I saw how I could have applied that better in the very first one that I did, where I was just getting my feet under me there and still messing with brush settings and things like that. And I'm in here now, and without looking at the reference, I am improving the drawing. I think that this is sort of a separate notion, but I think that this is an important thing for anyone who wants to spend a lot of time working from imagination. I think you should be very open to doing this whenever you are working from reference. You need to be willing to improve drawings that started from reference, improve them and work on them without the reference. And that, of course, implies being open to ruining them because you're not looking at the reference. And that's okay. It's okay to ruin drawings. You know, the idea of ruination is imputed by our minds. You know, it's not actually occurring on the paper. The drawing is merely shapes of color and value and line. So do get comfortable with this. The classic way that this is practiced in traditional life drawing is that once the model's pose is over, you know, their timer goes off and they start moving and putting their robe on, you just keep working on it. You just keep working on it. This is one of the classic places where people who do a lot of life drawing build their ability to work from imagination and to design. You don't stop or feel like you can't keep going just because the model moved. I mean, have you no memory, you know? Or you were staring at the pose for the past 20 minutes, right? You can't trust yourself that you kind of remember where that shadow was, that finger was, anything like that. Like, you do get better at that the more that you practice. So I would highly advise you not be a Puritan about it, and let yourself work on the pieces even when the reference is not there. Either you've stopped looking at the photo or the model at life drawing has moved. I think that this teaches a very, very important skill set for anybody who is looking to work more from imagination. All right, so we're wrapping up here. I am poking at the face and sort of unifying its value and color field with everything that I did on the body. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for your drawing practice today. I'm sure you drew along to this, right? I hope so. I hope that you were drawing along to this. No reason to stare at my drawings. Just use me as a little buddy to help you get through another 40-minute drawing session. And yeah, I hope that you find time to let yourself draw purely for the purpose of enjoying it and feeling joy. I think that's very important. Some notes for anybody who might want to record drawings like I do. To keep Sandbox time feeling free, I trained out of me the impulse that if the recording was running, I was going to use it. So I went through a period where I basically just recorded everything that I did, minimize it, and just, would let it run. And then when I was done, I would delete it, hold on to it, not use it, just like slowly desensitize myself to, now I'm at the point where it doesn't matter to me that the recording is running. I have sort of trained my brain to realize the truth, which is that the fact the recording is running means nothing. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to use it. It doesn't make it more serious. I've tried to record things that I was very serious about and had it all fall apart. I've tried to record things that I thought didn't matter, and then those turned out great, and then I would use those in a video. So just through exposure, I'm kind of over caring about it. So now, if I feel like it, I will record a morning coffee session. But there's also a lot of others that I just don't, because I just don't need to, and I want it to feel totally free. But it can also feel free while the recording is running. If you have shown yourself many times, like, I don't need to use everything that I draw. It doesn't matter. All right, with that, I will leave you. Take care, everybody, and happy drawing.